basically who
Oh,
you are.
is it go time now?
It's go time.
I was waiting for those little things to come down. Well, so I'm Jason Bryant, and I originally I was born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas. Went to high school at Pascal there, and then went to undergraduate at Texas A&M. Woo! And finished at A&M and went to medical school down in Houston, University of Texas at Houston Medical School. I made the transition from Houston to Central Texas and went to residency at Scott and White in Temple. We were there for 3 years and then came to Waco. This summer, it will be 19 years ago. I've worked in Waco for 19 years, which is really hard to believe. I never would have thought we'd live in Central Texas. I didn't really know where we were going to go, but Waco was not on my list. We absolutely love Waco now. It's what we call home. We're perfectly content to stay here. Our kids have grown up here, and this is our community now. Never would have thought we'd make that kind of a spiral through Texas and wind up in Waco, but it really is a good place to be for us, and we're perfectly pleased to be here. What's funny is I really like to solve problems. My undergraduate was in mechanical engineering, which that's what you do. They train you to think through solving problems. And in some ways, there's a lot of parallel to medicine because you're solving problems. So you're using a lot of the same theory and a lot of the same mindset to do that. And so it was a natural fit, which seems strange, but it really is just an opportunity to solve problems. Now, that's on a very broad level. Medicine, there's so many aspects of medicine that a lot of people never get to experience. What other occupation can you spend less than a few minutes with somebody and they're sharing some aspects of their life that you never thought you would ever hear? Whether it's their deepest fears, maybe it's their biggest concerns in life, or something that obviously they're here because something's not right. They're either hurt or they're injured in some way. But within just a few minutes, you can establish a rapport and a trust with somebody that there's really no other occupation out there that people are willing to share some of the most intimate details of their life in such a short amount of time. And so, yes, I was trained to problem solve, but it's even bigger than that. Medicine gives you a window into people's lives that 99% of the people never get an aspect into. It's an honor to work as a doctor, but there's also a great respect that you have to have for it for that very reason. So, yes, it started out in engineering, but a lot of the same, way you think through problems is just a different kind of system, but it's the same mindset. Probably, I wish we had spent more time preparing for how to truly care for people. Mm-hmm. You can't train that. So in medical school, they train you how to think through like body systems and how to solve issues and problems. It's very technical, but yet the hardest part of it is actually training you to truly care for somebody, which is different. We've all met those doctors that are just incredibly smart and can solve any problem you got, but their bedside manner is not that great. You can't really train that. But I think going into it, I think if somebody had explained, like, spend more time on how to speak to people and how to relate to them and how to truly care for them, I think that would have been really good to know. I think it would have. You're so trained to know the technical aspects of medicine, and that's what they train you for in medical school, and you have to know that stuff. But I think if we'd spent more time on actually learning how to care for people and how to communicate with people, I think it would make some maybe better rounded physicians out there. There's always the time management stuff. You're going to be really busy for the rest of your life. And not that that's a big surprise, but I think that's part of it too. Oh, I guess probably the most honoring is if they say, "Hey, do you have a primary care? Can I see you later?" That's always a very honoring question. And the reason why I chose emergency medicine is because I like unscheduled care. I like to be able to take care of people on the fly. But that is a very honoring question when they say, "Hey, do you have a primary care? Can I come see you later?" Probably the more common question that we get is, "So I searched on Google and I think I've got this." And then you can fill in the blank with, pretty much whatever calamity they think is going on. And so we do a lot of times based on those kind of questions, like we're talking people off the ledge, like they're pretty much convinced they're dying tomorrow, or tonight for that matter. So that's probably very common. That's always fun because they know that they get the extreme. So when you search on Google, you're going to get the extremes. You're going to get the really simple stuff and the really extreme kind of rare stuff. And they understand that. So it is a fun discussion. They always say it in a weird way. So I was looking on Google. You're waiting for what were they thinking? So what's the worst case scenario that I'm about to encounter? So in some ways, it's fun when they ask those kind of questions because you can bring some levity to it. It's like, okay, here it is. It's really not that bad, but it does give you an opportunity to talk them through scenarios. That's always been a lot of fun too. So. Probably the most common thing, most people are pretty aware of like TV drama for like hospitals or ER or being a doctor. And it goes way back. And we're talking like Trapper John back in the 80s to like MASH in the military sense. But even more recent, ER back in the 90s. When I was in medical school, that was really hot. So everybody saw that and thought that's what ER is like. And even more recent, like Grey's Anatomy. Most people are aware of what, that's their conception of what the hospital life or ER life is like. It's not nearly as glamorous as you think it is. Probably 80% of what we do is the same stuff over and over again. We just do it again and again. And it's that 20% where you might see some crazy stuff, something that maybe you hadn't seen in a long time, or you have to go back and hit a textbook to figure it out again. But the vast majority of what we do, a lot of it, and common things are really common. And so that's probably the biggest misconception. People think it's really glamorous. People are dying left and right, or we're shoving needles here and we're shocking here. And we're like, every person that rolls in is some crazy backstory that no one's ever heard of. So that's probably the biggest misconception. Most people feel like it's more like a TV drama, and it's really not. We see a lot of the same stuff over and over again. That's okay. That's not a problem. It is fun. And when I was in medical school, we saw ER was very popular back then. I'd always known I wanted to do emergency medicine, even really before medical school. That's really what I wanted to do. And so when you see the drama on ER, I even went into it with some misconceptions,
Right.
But it is very exciting. The unscheduled aspect of emergency medicine is really what's cool about it. You can think of how many different ways somebody can be hurt or injured and multiply that by 100. There's just so many different nuances or different iterations of how somebody can be sick or hurt, so that even though you're dealing with some very common things, every story is a little bit different. And there's, different aspects to it that you have to consider, and not extremely glamorous, but very fulfilling. I have 4 daughters and a wife at home. There's no other boys, just me. 2 of my daughters are in college. I have a sophomore at Oklahoma State, and I have a freshman at Texas A&M, and I have 2 in high school. So we have seen the full gamut of raising girls, and no 2 days are the same. There is a lot of emotion. That's just the nature of having a house full of girls. And so as a guy in that situation, oh gosh, there's so many lessons to have learned. I think probably the best thing to say is you should probably be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Pretty healthy advice. Listen more, say less, and just try and keep a steady demeanor, because you can imagine some of the emotion and drama, and it's very natural, and I'm not critical of it. It's very natural, but it's like waves, and they just come in waves, and you can just, if you're closer to the wave, it's going to be a lot of up and down. As you get further out, it's a little smoother. There may be some ripples and whatnot, but I think for a house full of girls, it's really just being steady, so that you have a calm and reliable demeanor, that though there may be waves rocking around you, you can be that steady that you can lean on. There's never a dull moment. I wouldn't change it for the world. It's so exciting. And those girls are, golly, I couldn't even imagine life without those girls. So really awesome. That's a great question. And I guess we can dispel that myth right away. So if you have girls, they already have those songs picked out. It doesn't matter what I want, right? So daughters have that stuff all figured out long before. They just need a dude to plug in that they're going to marry. So they've got that all figured out. So for me to come to the table and say, I really like this song, they'd be like, oh, that's a great song, but we're going to do this song. Okay. What's a dad going to say? Okay. Yeah, in general, the 6-hour rule does make a difference. So basically, if you can get to a laceration within 6 hours, the risk of infection is relatively minor, depending on the wound. If it's a dirty wound, or you scraped it in the dirt, or when you cut it with an axe or some kind of tool that's dirty or whatever, there's always going to be a risk of infection. But the longer that wound stays open, the greater the risk, and it starts growing with time. Is it an absolute rule at 6 hours? Not really, but in reality, you'd like to get to it fairly quickly. There are some instances where if you get a wound that's over 10 or 12 or 18 hours old, you just probably shouldn't mess with it. Now, there are some differences. So for instance, like a cut on the face, you have a little bit more time. You don't have to jump on it immediately. But the longer it stays open, the greater the risk of infection. And if it is a delay in getting it repaired, you would probably put them on some antibiotics just to protect them, knowing that the risk is greater. Sometimes it could affect the healing and the scarring. Certainly, if you get an infection because you sewed it up too late, or it just got infected because it was contaminated, you're probably not going to have as great of a cosmetic outcome. So in some ways, getting to it quickly is good because you're more likely to have a better cosmetic outcome. You're less likely to have an infection. And most of the time, the wounds are generally easier to close up. So what happens is over time, the wound actually starts to heal itself, and you start laying down healing tissue. It just traps whatever bacteria in the wound. And so you really have to scrub it out a lot if it's been a delayed time. So it's not a fast and hard rule, but it is a good idea. So if you have a cut and you're pretty sure it's going to need stitches, the sooner you get to it, the better. Yeah, this is easy for me. I would fly. I would love to be able to fly like a drone. Like I could be a drone. I love to look from above. So like when Google Earth came out and you could like go over places and just look at it from above is awesome. When we fly as a family on an airplane, like I always get the window seat. And when I had a lot more hair back in my younger days, every time I got off the airplane, I would have this like flat spot where my hair, because I'm staring out the window the whole time. So it would definitely be wanting to fly around like a drone. I think that would just be really cool, like a bird.
Nice.
Yeah. Being a physician, there's just no other occupation where you can get into people's lives very quickly. And so part of that is you have to establish a rapport. You have to be able to establish trust very quickly. So in my mind, what I love most about it is, one, once you've established that trust, people will share a lot of details about their life. And in some ways, being a physician is more than just having the technical aspect. It's truly being able to care for people. And in order to do that, you have to get into their life very quickly. And so I see it as an opportunity into people's lives where they're sharing some pretty serious stuff, whether it's a fear, it's an anxiety, maybe it's a hurt. And that could be physical, that could be emotional, that could be relational. Every aspect of that comes into play when you're taking care of people. And so I see it as an opportunity. It's really, and I think every job is like this, but in this one aspect, it's very critical because you're caring for people, is that this is an extension of your ministry to others. People share things that they don't share, and in some cases, they don't even share with their own spouse or their own family. And so you have an opportunity to pour into people's lives, and to maybe even, in some cases, you may be sharing some ways to correct bad attitudes or bad thoughts about things. Sometimes you're able to change habits, but more than anything, you can plant a seed and you can share with them aspects of their life that maybe they've never considered. And part of that is just, it's an opportunity into people's lives that other people just don't get. And so I see it as an opportunity to share life with them, maybe to explain ways to handle issues that they're dealing with that maybe they hadn't considered. I truly see it as an opportunity to even share God's word with them. It's not uncommon that I'll pull out my pocket Bible and we'll share a couple of verses that might help them through something that they're dealing with that they didn't even realize. That I see it as a personal ministry, as an opportunity to pour into people's lives in ways that go beyond medicine, that go beyond just handling some technical issue they're dealing with. There's history, there's emotions, there's relational baggage. There's a lot of different things that actually impact why they're here. Mm-hmm. And if you can't get to the bottom of why they're here in a short amount of time, you may be able to treat the symptom, but are you truly treating the disease? A good example of that is somebody comes in with like chest pain. You can make their chest pain stop, but are you really fixing the disease? So you go back to handle the actual disease of why they're having chest pain is really the greater aspect. They have heart disease. That's why they're having chest pain. And you can put a Band-Aid on their chest pain, but you haven't really fixed the major issue. So a lot of things that we see, people come in and they're anxious. They're worried about something. You can fix that problem, but unless you go to the foundational problem, it's just a temporary fix. Your symptom management versus disease management. And if you can get to the reason why people are there and address that, now you're actually accomplishing something. Now you're actually giving them the tools to handle what they're dealing with in probably a more positive way and in a more life-giving way that allows them to handle that in the future, as opposed to just fixing their daily problem. If the foundational problem is still there, they may be solved for the day, but it's coming back tomorrow. One of the beauties of emergency medicine is your schedule, right? So it's great. Like you work your number of shifts for the month. When you're not working, you're off. And for the most part, if you're not working, if you're not on duty, you pretty much have no responsibilities. But the same thing that's a great aspect about emergency medicine is also probably the most challenging, because when you're working shift work, that means you're working some day shifts, but you're also working an equal number of night shifts. And you're working weekends and you're working holidays. So the thing that is really one of the greatest aspects of emergency medicine is also probably the most challenging, is being able to transition from day to night and somehow managing a family at the same time. Unfortunately, when you do shift work, you miss some events. So there are some golf tournaments, volleyball matches, tournaments that I just simply can't go to. And as a family, as a growing family, you sort of get used to it. This is the way our family has been for 20 years. So it's not like it's a major change. But that's definitely probably the hardest thing, knowing that someone's heart attack still happens on Christmas Day. You still fall and cut your leg open on Mother's Day, even though you were planning on being somewhere. Yeah. So emergencies, illnesses, pains, hurts, they happen 24 hours a day. And someone has to be here for it. So that's probably the hardest thing to deal with. And then there's also, we give a lot of advice for people. You want them to take the advice and you hope that you're empowering them to make better choices for their life. But you can spend a lot of time with somebody really walking them through it, and you think you're getting some groundwork there, and then they come back a week later and it's the exact same thing. Yeah. And it's just, you have to understand you're planting seeds. You're trying to get people to change some really ingrained habits, and sometimes that gets a little frustrating. But you just have to see it as a process. And the good thing about unscheduled care is that you never know when it's going to come in. It's unscheduled. Nobody plans for their emergency. And so you have to be ready to go at 4 a.m., at 2 in the afternoon, at midnight, on Christmas Day, on Thanksgiving Day, on the Saturday afternoon. So that's probably the hardest aspect of it. I probably wouldn't. Nah, I got enough to deal with here on Earth, and Earth has enough treasures and trials all on its own. I think it's interesting to see some of the pictures that are coming back from this NASA rover. I think that's kind of cool. Nah, I think I got enough to deal with on Earth here. I think I'm satisfied just to stay right where I'm at. I'm trying to hang on to as much hair as I can. I don't want to challenge it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I think I'm content to stay on Earth.